Good evening, everyone. Our Jerome Harris here from eProphetic.com, and today I'm going to talk about the topic of hell, and specifically, is hell eternal? And along the way, I'm going to ask and answer the questions: what is hell? Is it hot? Where is it? If a person goes into hell, can they get out of it? So, you know, there is a major problem in the world, and I view it as a problem, when you have billions of individuals who believe that this concept, this place called hell, is some Dante's Inferno type place. You know, in movies, in film, and art, you know, we see hell being portrayed as a place that's below the ground. It's hot. The devil's down there. His demons are down there. People are being prodded and poked with pitchforks, and they're being tormented and tortured. But yet, they have eyes. They can see. They can talk. Their flesh isn't being consumed. They're just being tortured. I mean, anything that I know of, especially flesh, if it's being if it's subjected to intense heat, fire, it's going to burn. I mean, that's just outright common sense. But my point here is that you have billions of people who really believe that hell is a place of eternal torment, and they associate the devil and his demons, these, you know, as hideous creatures down there as well. Now, is that accurate? And a lot of that's coming from, you know, different cultures. Hell is also referred to as Hades, the land of the dead. And also, what is the status of the dead? I've had friends and loved ones pass away, so can they hear me right now? Can they see me? Is there evidence that the dead can communicate with the living? Because someone says that they see ghosts, why would one associate what they call ghosts with dead spirits? You see, where's all that coming from? It's coming from the imaginations of people. You know, some of the most dangerous places to exist for any of us is in the imagination of us, because we can imagine some pretty incredible things. But I'm going to approach this topic from the standpoint of what is widely believed from the Bible and from within Christianity, and see if we can come to some type of understanding as to what hell is, and is it eternal? Now, let me answer the question, first of all, based on what's written in the Bible about the status of those who have died. If you go to Ecclesiastes chapter 9 verse 5, and you can drop down to verse 10 also. At Ecclesiastes chapter 9 verse 5, we are told by the wise man Solomon that the dead are in a deep sleep. For the most part, they're unconscious. They're not aware of anything. They're not aware of any passages of time. If a person, say, died, say, 10,000 years ago, and let's say by some miracle of the resurrection, that person is brought back to life again, that person would have no recollection of that 10,000 year passage of time that passed over him or her. It's like, you know, a person sitting, say, in some ruins in Rome or Greece, let's say 10,000 years ago, or wherever in the world 10,000 years ago, and 10,000 years passes by that dead person, that dead person opens their eyes for the first time again, and all of a sudden their surroundings are completely different. What a trip that would be. So at the moment I close my eyes in death, until I'm resurrected again by Christ, he promised this at John chapter 5 verse 28 and 29, it will be as if I blinked my eyes. I closed them in death, and in an instant I open them again, and I'm in a completely different environment, because I am not aware of the passage of time. If you also look there at Ecclesiastes chapter 9 and drop down to verse 10, and it says that as for the realm of the dead, there is no working, there is no planning, there is no knowledge, and there's no wisdom. There's nothing, because you're turned off. You're dead. That's what death is. So when you hear individuals who lose loved ones and friends, and they believe that they have gone to heaven or to this made-up fiery hell, then there really is good news there. There's good news here, because they're in neither of those places. They're in their graves. They are in hell. Therein is your answer of what hell is. Hell is the grave. It is Hades. It is the realm of the dead. It is 6 feet under. It's in the watery deep if a person drowns and dies there. It's the tomb. Now, can one get out of hell? Well, Jesus died, right? And he spent 3 days in a tomb. That was his grave. So Jesus showed that one can come out of hell, or Hades, out of the grave. So hell is not some fiery place of eternal torment. Now, let me elaborate on that further and prove to you from what's written in the Bible, and many of you believe the Bible. If you go to Revelation chapter 20, verse 14, it is very interesting what's written there. It says there, and death and hell are thrown into something. Look at it. Can you burn death? Can you burn hell? Because we're told there that death and hell are thrown into the lake of fire. So that shows that hell and the lake of fire are not the same thing, because death and hell are thrown into the lake of fire, which is the second death. That's exactly what it says there. And in previous videos and on articles on my website, I've gone into great depth as to what the lake of fire is, which is the second death. And just to paraphrase what I wrote down in those articles, the lake of fire, which is the second death, is simply a symbol of non-existence. Anything that goes into the lake of fire, which is the second death, ceases to exist. It's like taking a piece of paper, throwing it into a literal fire, it ceases to be paper. You can't bring it back to being paper again. It's gone. That paper no longer exists. So that we read that death and hell, both of those, and usually death and hell are mentioned together within Scripture. But that death and hell are both thrown into the lake of fire shows that one day death and hell, graves, will no longer exist. Implying what? That people will no longer die. Now, if you go up to Revelation chapter 21, verse 4, if you read that, it says there that there will be no more death. Why is that? Why does it say at Revelation chapter 21 verse 4 that there will be no more death, or death will be no more? Because we just previously read at Revelation chapter 20 verse 14 that both death and hell are thrown into the lake of fire, which means that they will no longer exist. So it makes sense that death will be no more, that people will no longer die, and that's far, far into the future, in a completely different world, unlike anything that we see now. We can't even imagine what this gem of a planet's going to be like, what it's going to look like, what we are going to be like, and what we're going to look like in those future days when Christ has his kingdom of 1,000 years over the earth, and it's going to end. Satan does his thing, then God's kingdom comes down, and it will reside or envelop the earth forever. We have no idea what it's going to be like. It is not going to be some Norman Rockwell place, or anything we see on the Sci-Fi Channel. Nothing like that. We can conjure up and imagine a lot of things, but no one can imagine what it's going to be like. An incredible gem. And even now, if one goes into outer space and looks at the Earth, it's beautiful. But as you come down into the atmosphere, I mean, it's still beautiful in a lot of places, but there's lots of pollution of the air, the water, and many war-torn lands, poverty, hatred, racism, bigotry. It's just, gosh, it's just bad down here. But when it's all done and God's kingdom comes down to the earth, and his will take place on earth as it already is in heaven, man, oh man, I want to be there. And it's not like what you see in, say, for example, Watchtower Publications. It's not like that. No, nothing like that. Quite frankly, I wouldn't want to live in a world like that. It's something sort of lopsided about all that. But I trust my God, and I trust my Lord, that all that would be taken care of. So that death and hell, or Hades, are thrown into the lake of fire, which is really a symbol of non-existence, shows that hell is not eternal. So get it out of your head that any bad people that you've ever known are somehow being tormented and tortured in some hellfire underneath the ground. Your loved ones are resting in death. What a cruel thing it is to teach that if you're a bad person, if you haven't accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, that you're being tormented forever in a made-up hellfire. And that doesn't even meet the definition of justice. The average lifespan, say here in the United States, of, say, a male is about 65, say 70 years old, right? Is that just? Does that paint a picture of a just God who's going to torture and torment you for all eternity for a relatively short year, a few short years of say, doing bad things? Let's say out of that 70-year lifespan of a man, that person, say, spends, say, 55 of those years just being a jerk. So God's going to punish that person for all eternity in a hellfire. For that, that's not just. The scales are not balanced. That's not eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth. So each and every person who has ever been born and who have died on this earth are now resting in death, and they will be resurrected. It's not a maybe; they will be. But see, it's much easier for Christendom to simplify or water down what's been taught about where people who die go. If you're bad, you go to their fiery hell. If you're good, you go to heaven. Floating around doing what? You see, they simplify it because they don't want to believe, or maybe they just can't articulate Christ's teachings. And of course, tradition has a lot to do with that too. Hollywood has a lot to do with that. The way they portray hell and heaven. Now, John chapter 3, verse 13, Jesus says something very interesting. Jesus says that no man has gone into heaven, has ever gone into heaven, except the one who's come down from heaven. We, that's mankind, humankind, we didn't come from heaven. We came out of the earth, below. The only person who came out of heaven to become a man, and then who went back, was the one that the world knows today as Jesus the Christ. You know, the Watchtower teaches that there are two classes of Christians. I take issue with that respectfully, because we don't find the expression, we don't read where Jesus calls his disciples Christians, where they call themselves Christians. So to say that there are two classes of Christians will be an error. But according to the Watchtower, these two classes of Christians, you have one who are made up of, who are of the anointed class. They call the anointed class, which consists of 144,000. And I am convinced that there aren't any chosen ones. There aren't any 144,000 or a remnant of them in existence today. Their choosing will certainly come, but it will be in a very distant time period. It is not now. So that's one class of Christians according to the Watchtower. The other class are known as the great crowd, whose numbers we can't number. You know, one can't number. So what the Watchtower is teaching is that those who are chosen belong to one class. They go to heaven. And I just showed you a scripture where Jesus himself says that no man has ever gone to heaven, and no man will ever go into heaven, except the one, except him. And the other class are those made up of the great crowd, and their existence will be on the earth forever. When the reality is that both this anointed chosen ones and the great crowd, which no man can number, will both reside on the earth in future days forever. Are they different? Yes, there's a difference. I'm not referring to physical differences. I'm referring to what their responsibilities and what they will be given to do. And some of those anointed ones in those future days will fail at what they have been given, as far as their missions or their assignments from Christ. They will fail. So there aren't two classes of Christians. Jesus never spoke of that. And so you can see here that that there's a picture emerging where in this world, you know, Jesus can teach something, but in this world, teachings pop up that either go against what he taught, you know, they're anti-Christ, or they're made up. and they don't come from Christ. In fact, if you read in Jeremiah chapter 7 verse 31, we're told there that God never envisioned such a place as a fiery hell. It never came up into his mind. So where does that come from? Well, I answered that question in the beginning of this presentation. It comes from the imagination of people. We conjure up these things, and we push these things off to the masses as truth. And really, they're going to be a combination. They're going to be either one or two things, or a combination of both. They're going to either be outright lies, error. Error is not a lie. Error means a person is simply mistaken. They think that what they're saying is correct, or a combination of both of those. Something in error and something that's an outright lie. Being in error and lying are two different things. A person can speak in something in error. It doesn't make that person a liar. But what you see oftentimes on YouTube and in discussions, comments people leave, they will say, well, you're lying. Well, maybe I or that person's just simply mistaken, or they're in error. And oftentimes too, what people really want, especially those persons of religion, because religion is a very emotional thing. Like I mentioned earlier in other videos, religion stokes the emotion, and it gets people worked up to where reason and rationale goes out the door. So they're not hearing you. You know, emotion is taking control now. So when you have discussions with individuals about this topic of hell, is it eternal, you can reason with them, or you can try to reason with them, and hopefully they will start thinking. You see, we ourselves, those who know, and I'm not saying this in an arrogant way, I'm simply saying this, and that I've done research, and I've been through the ringer. Trust me, for many, many years. You know, we plant seeds, but it is God who's going to make these things grow in people. So there really is no need for us to force anything down anyone's throat, because if they really want to know, they will not trust in men, not even in me. I don't want anyone to trust me. My preference is that they trust in God and the one that he sent, and listen to the one that he sent. The problem in the world today is that people are listening to other people. You know, ministers and so-called preachers who have the gift of gab, and they have oratory skills to motivate, to incite, to stoke and stir up the emotion. It's almost like a witch. You know, in those stories you see witches, they have these cauldrons, and they're throwing stuff in these cauldrons, and there's mist and smoke coming up. It's like they're conjuring up stuff to bewitch the masses, and that's exactly what has happened in the world today. The masses on the earth have been bewitched by religion for the most part, rather than individuals seeking their creator and listening to their creator, who has commanded us to listen to his son, the one that he sent. People have shown a preference in listening to men, and there are women too that many people listen to with regards to the things they believe are Christ's teachings, but are not. Okay, so that's about it. I reached my destination. So hopefully you have an understanding of what hell is. It is not a place of eternal torment. Hell is not eternal because it's thrown into the lake of fire, which is a symbol of non-existence. Food for thought. This is R. Jerome Harris. Thank you for listening.